The smell of burnt coffee and hospital disinfectant still haunted Sarah Walker's nostrils 10 years later. She closed her eyes in the excavator cab, her hands trembling on the controls as the diesel engine idled. The vacant lot before her had once been the Lone Star Motel off Interstate 35 in the heart of Texas. Now only cracked concrete foundations and sun-baked weeds remained as silent witnesses. Sarah took a deep breath, the dry air burning her throat. At 32, she was a different woman from the one who had vanished from this very spot a decade ago. Her brown hair, once long and lustrous, was now cut short and practical. Fine scars crisscrossed her arms, some visible, others hidden beneath sun-kissed skin earned from years of outdoor work. The call had come 3 days prior, while she was overseeing the demolition of an old warehouse in Austin. "We found something," Detective Miller's gravelly voice had said, "at the old motel site. You need to come." The silence that followed weighed like lead in her lungs. 10 years of therapy, of rebuilding her identity, of learning to sleep without nightmares, all threatened by 2 simple words: "We found something." Sarah engaged the excavator, and the mechanical arm moved with surgical precision toward the spot marked with yellow tape by the investigators. The soil was softer there, as if someone had dug recently, but she knew better. She knew that this earth had been keeping secrets for far longer. The excavator's blade bit into the parched earth with a muffled thud. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the last time she'd been here. It was July 2014. She was 22, fleeing an abusive relationship in Oklahoma. The Lone Star Motel had seemed like a cheap, inconspicuous refuge, a place where she could spend a few nights while she figured out her next move. But she never got the chance to decide. The memory hit her like a punch to the gut. Room 15, with its faded orange curtains and the perpetually dripping noisy air conditioner. The man at the reception desk, Marcus Webb, with his eyes that were too bright and a smile that didn't reach them. The way he'd insisted on carrying her bag, how his fingers lingered on hers as he handed over the key. Sarah increased the pressure on the lever. The excavator dug deeper. "Easy, Sarah." Detective Miller's voice crackled over the radio. "We don't want to damage any evidence." Evidence. The word echoed in her mind like a death knell. For 10 years, the authorities had assumed she'd simply disappeared, another runaway girl who decided to start a new life. She never corrected them, never told the truth about what had really happened at that motel. Some secrets were too heavy to share. The metal of the blade scraped against something solid. Sarah stopped abruptly, her heart hammering. Miller came running, followed by 2 forensic technicians. Sarah shut off the engine and climbed down from the cab, her shaky legs hitting the Texas soil. "What is it?" one of the technicians murmured, crouching by the small crater Sarah had opened. Partially exposed in the dark earth was a rusty metal box, about the size of a shoebox. Sarah recognized the pattern of the rust instantly, the specific shape of the broken lock. Her blood ran cold. "Back away," Miller said, but his voice seemed to come from far away. Sarah stared at the box, a wave of nausea washing over her. She knew exactly what was inside. The technicians worked meticulously to extract the box from the earth. Sarah watched every movement, every careful brushstroke that removed the accumulated dirt. When they finally placed it on a plastic tarp, it weighed like a miniature coffin. Miller donned latex gloves and carefully pried open the rusted lid. The groan of forced metal cut through the air like a scream of agony. Sarah closed her eyes, but she couldn't block out the memory that came flooding back. July 2014, room 15, 3 in the morning. She had woken to the sound of footsteps in the hallway, not the usual sounds of late-night guests, but something different, deliberate, calculated. Sarah got out of bed, her bare feet hitting the rough, stained carpet. Through the thin wall, she could hear muffled voices coming from the next room. "Is she ready?" Then Marcus said to wait until morning. "He's seen too much. We can't risk it." Sarah moved closer to the wall, pressing her ear against the cold surface. The voices were male, one definitely Marcus Webb's, the other, younger, nervous. Asterisk. What if someone looks for her? Asterisk. Then one will look. Girls like her disappear all the time. Just another runaway. Sarah's blood ran cold. They were talking about her. Sarah, Miller's voice brought her back to the present. Are you all right? She opened her eyes and saw the contents of the box spread out on the tarp. Photographs, dozens of them, all of young women, some still teenagers, all with the same look of terror in their eyes, all in locations Sarah recognized, rooms in the Lone Star Motel. But it wasn't just photographs. There were also IDs, driver's licenses, some cheap jewelry, keepsakes. Sarah immediately recognized a silver bracelet with a heart charm. It belonged to a girl named Lisa she'd met the night she arrived at the motel. Lisa had disappeared the next morning, and Sarah had assumed she'd simply left early. My God, one of the technicians murmured. How many are there? Miller counted silently. 17. 17 different women. Sarah felt her knees buckle. She sank heavily to the rocky ground, the reality crystallizing in her mind like forming ice. She hadn't been the first, and if she hadn't escaped that terrible July night, she wouldn't have been the last. Asterisk. The memory continued to unfold, relentless. Asterisk. Sarah had gone back to bed, feigning sleep, but keeping her senses sharp. About an hour later, she heard her door handle being carefully tested. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Asterisk. The door creaked open slowly. Marcus Webb entered, followed by another man she didn't recognize, younger, with a stubble beard, and eyes that reflected the parking lot lights like an animal's. "He's asleep," Marcus whispered. Asterisk. Asterisk. Sarah controlled her breathing, forcing herself to keep her eyes closed and her body relaxed. Through her squeezed eyelids, she saw Marcus approaching the bed, something glinting in his hand. Asterisk. A camera. "Is shed. Get some pictures first," he said to his companion. Asterisk. Asterisk. Sarah didn't wait to hear the rest. In a swift move, she rolled off the bed and ran towards the door. The element of surprise worked for a few precious seconds. She managed to get past Marcus, but the younger man grabbed her arm. "Let me go," she screamed, but her voice was lost in the roar of a truck passing on the highway. Asterisk. Marcus chuckled softly. "No one's going to hear you out here, sweetheart. This motel has excellent soundproofing." Asterisk. Sarah struggled desperately, her nails finding the younger man's face. He yelled and let go for a moment. Enough time for her to grab the heavy glass ashtray from the nightstand and hurl it at the window. Asterisk. The glass exploded into 1,000 pieces, and a car alarm in the parking lot blared. In the ensuing chaos, Sarah managed to escape through the broken window, cutting herself on the shards of glass, but running like she'd never run in her life. She didn't stop until she reached the police station, 3 miles away. "Sarah, I need you to tell me everything," Detective Miller said, his voice gentle but firm. "Everything you remember from that night." Sarah looked again at the photographs scattered on the tarp, young faces, full of life that had been brutally extinguished. She thought of their families, of parents likely still waiting for news, of siblings guarding untouched rooms, waiting for a return that would never come. "I was there," she said finally, her voice little more than a whisper. "I could have been one of them." Miller nodded gravely. "But you weren't. You escaped. And now you can help us bring justice." Justice. The word tasted bitter in Sarah's mouth. She had spent 10 years rebuilding her life, trying to forget that terrible night. She had moved to Austin, learned to operate heavy machinery, found purpose in demolition and reconstruction. She had even started dating Tom, a kind veteran who worked as a paramedic and understood nightmares without asking too many questions. But the photographs of those dead girls changed everything. "Is Marcus Webb still alive?" she asked. Miller hesitated. "He died 5 years ago. Heart attack. But there was another man with him that night. wasn't there? Sarah nodded, the image of the younger man's face still sharp in her memory after all these years. Younger than Marcus, stubble beard. Eyes like a predator's. Could you work with a forensic artist? Help us create a composite sketch. Before Sarah could answer, her phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. You should have stayed dead. Sarah's blood ran cold. With trembling hands, she showed the message to Miller. The detective's face hardened immediately. Let's get out of here now. But it was too late. The sound of tires screeching on the asphalt echoed down the deserted road, and a black pickup truck appeared on the horizon, rapidly approaching the excavation site. Sarah recognized the driver instantly, even after 10 years. The same angular face, the same predatory eyes. The man who had tried to kill her that terrible night at the Lone Star Motel. Danny Morrison, Miller muttered, his hand automatically going to the gun in his holster. Knew he'd surface sooner or later. The pickup stopped 50 yards away, kicking up a cloud of dust that partially obscured the figure behind the wheel. Sarah could feel his eyes on her, even through the dust and distance. Both of you, get out of here. Miller ordered the forensic technicians. Take the evidence. But Danny Morrison didn't wait. The pickup door opened and he slowly got out, a shotgun in his hand. He was thinner now, gray hair at the temples, but the cruel smile was exactly the same. Sarah Hendricks, he shouted, his voice carrying easily in the dry air. The one that got away. Sarah felt the excavator at her back and a crazy idea began to form in her mind. She knew that machine better than anyone. She had operated similar equipment for years, developed an intimacy with the controls that transcended mere technical knowledge. Why did you do it? She shouted back, buying time while calculating distances and angles. Why did you kill all those girls? Danny laughed, a sound as rough as tearing paper. Because I could. Because nobody cared about them. Lost girls, runaways, whores nobody would look for. Miller had positioned himself behind one of the police vehicles, his gun pointed at Danny. Drop the shotgun, Morrison. You're surrounded. Surrounded? Danny looked around theatrically. I only see one old cop and one traumatized hooker. The word hit Sarah like a slap in the face, bringing back all the humiliation and terror of that night. But this time, she wasn't the scared 22-year-old girl anymore. She was a woman who had survived, who had rebuilt herself, who had found strength in her scars. Sarah started moving towards the excavator, trying to appear casual. You buried the others here too. Some. Others went to more permanent places. Danny adjusted his aim. But you were always special, Sarah, the only one who escaped. That bothered me for years. Then why didn't you look for me sooner? Because it was more fun to let you think you were safe, to let you build a new life, find happiness. His smile widened, then to take it all away. Sarah reached for the side of the excavator. Her fingers found the cab door handle. And the families? Did you never think of their families? Families? Danny spat on the ground. If they had families that cared, they wouldn't be wandering alone through cheap Texas motels. It was at that moment Sarah realized this wasn't just a sexual predator or a common murderer. Danny Morrison was something worse, a man who had completely lost his humanity, who saw other people as disposable objects for his sadistic pleasure. And she finally understood why she had survived that night. It wasn't luck or chance, it was because she had fought, because she had refused to accept the victim role he wanted to impose. Sarah opened the excavator door and quickly climbed into the cab. Danny realized the movement too late. Hey, get out of there. The diesel engine roared to life. Sarah worked the controls with precise fluid movements, the excavator's mechanical arm swinging towards Danny like a giant fist. Danny fired his shotgun, but Sarah had already ducked her head. The pellets ricocheted off the cab's armored glass, creating a spiderweb of cracks but failing to penetrate. Miller took advantage of the distraction to approach, but Danny saw him coming and swung the shotgun in his direction. No, Sarah screamed. The sound of the gunshot echoed across the wasteland like thunder. Miller fell, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. The fury Sarah had contained for 10 years finally exploded. She accelerated the excavator, the rubber tracks thundering across the rocky ground. Danny tried to run, but the machine was faster. The mechanical arm struck him in the legs, knocking him violently to the ground. Danny rolled on the ground, trying to reach the shotgun that had fallen a few feet away. Sarah positioned the excavator over him, the mechanical arm suspended like the sword of Damocles. "Sarah, don't do this," Miller yelled, even wounded. "You're not like him." For an interminable moment, Sarah looked down at the man who had haunted her nightmares for a decade. Danny stared back, and for the first time since she'd met him, there was real fear in his eyes. "Please," he whispered, "I can tell you where the other bodies are. I can help the families have closure." Sarah hesitated. Through the cracked cab glass, she could see the photographs still scattered on the tarp. 17 young faces that would never grow old, never marry, never have children. But she also thought of Tom, waiting for her in Austin. She thought of the life she had built, the future she could still have. She thought about the difference between justice and revenge. Slowly, Sarah lowered the mechanical arm until it touched the ground beside Danny, not on him. She turned off the engine and climbed out of the cab, her legs trembling violently. Miller had managed to get up and was applying pressure to his shoulder wound. "Ambulance is on its way," he said, trying to smile through the pain. Danny remained on the ground, looking at Sarah with a mixture of gratitude and resentment. "You were always different from the others," he mumbled. "Stronger." "No," Sarah said, crouching beside him. "I just got lucky. Lucky to escape. Lucky to have the chance to rebuild myself. Those girls deserve the same chance I had." Sirens began to wail in the distance, rapidly approaching. Sarah looked one last time at the photographs scattered on the tarp, then at the endless Texas sky. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of orange and red. If you made it this far in this intense story, I know you appreciate narratives that touch the human soul, that explore the darkest corners of experience, and the incredible strength we find to survive. Please subscribe to the channel now and hit the notification bell, because stories like this, which make us reflect on courage, justice, and redemption, deserve to be shared. Your subscription encourages me to continue bringing narratives that connect us with our deepest humanity. Danny Morrison was arrested that afternoon and confessed to the location of 8 other victims buried at different points in Texas. 3 months later, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Miller fully recovered from his shoulder wound and was promoted to captain. He still maintains regular contact with Sarah, not just professionally, but a genuine friendship forged on that terrible day in the wasteland. Sarah returned to Austin and told Tom everything. He listened in silence, holding her hands as she spoke, never judging her or asking unnecessary questions. 2 months later, he proposed marriage at a small Italian restaurant where they used to have dinner on Fridays. But not everything was resolved simply. Investigations revealed that the Lone Star Motel had been part of a larger network of establishments used to lure vulnerable victims. Marcus Webb and Danny Morrison hadn't acted alone. There were others, scattered across different states, who remained active. Sarah became an informal consultant for the FBI, helping to identify patterns and locations where other victims might be buried. Her intimate knowledge of the predator's tactics, combined with her experience in heavy machinery, proved to be a unique and valuable combination. 6 months after the confrontation in the wasteland, Sarah received a letter in her mailbox. There was no return address, only an address in Nevada. Inside, a single photograph, a young redhead, no older than 17, with the same terrified eyes she had seen in so many other victims. On the back of the photograph, a handwritten message: "The network is bigger than you think. It hasn't been found yet. You need help." Sarah showed the photograph to Detective Miller, who immediately launched an investigation. They discovered the young woman's name was Rebecca Stone, and she had disappeared 3 weeks prior in Las Vegas. The last person to see her alive was a motel employee on the outskirts of the city. Sarah knew she had a choice to make. She could hand the photograph over to the authorities and resume her relatively normal life in Austin, marrying Tom and trying to forget the past. Or she could accept that her survival that July night hadn't been just luck, it had been a calling. The next morning, she woke before dawn and found Tom in the kitchen, making coffee. He looked at her and immediately knew something had shifted. "You're going after her, aren't you?" he said. Not as a question, but as a statement. Sarah nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "That girl, she's the same age I was when I ran away from home. If I don't," Tom hugged her, and she smelled the familiar scent of his aftershave mixed with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee. "Then we will," he said simply. You think I'm going to let you face this alone? I'm an EMT, I can handle emergencies, and," he hesitated for a moment, "I also know what it's like to carry scars from the past." For the first time in months, Sarah smiled genuinely. She had spent so many years believing she needed to confront her demons alone, that her survival had somehow made her responsible for all the other victims. But perhaps true strength didn't come from solitude, but from connection with people who chose to stand by your side. 3 days later, Sarah and Tom were driving down I-15 towards Las Vegas, the desolate desert landscape stretching endlessly in every direction. In the back seat, a specialized toolbox, Sarah had assembled portable excavation equipment, metal detectors, fiber optic cameras for soil inspection. Rebecca Stone was still missing, but for the first time in 3 weeks, someone was actively searching for her. Someone who understood how predators thought, how they operated, where they hid their secrets. Sarah drove with the windows down, the warm desert wind whipping through her short hair. On the radio, a country song played softly, about second chances and winding roads that lead home. She thought of the 17 photographs found in that rusty box, the faces that never quite left her memory. She thought of their families, who finally had answers however painful. She thought of Danny Morrison, rotting in a prison cell, his hunting days definitively over. But mostly, she thought of the missing girl who might still be saved. Rebecca Stone, 17 years old, red hair, eyes filled with fear in an anonymous photograph. The sun was setting on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. In a few hours they would reach Las Vegas, and a new search would begin. Sarah didn't know if they would find Rebecca alive or dead, if they would manage to dismantle another part of the predator network, if she herself would survive what she might find. But for the first time in 10 years, she knew exactly who she was and what her purpose was. She was no longer just a survivor, carrying trauma and guilt. She was a hunter, using her scars as a map, her memories as a compass. The Lone Star Motel was gone, destroyed and erased from the Texan landscape. But its true demolition had happened that day in the wasteland, when Sarah chose justice over revenge, the future over the past. Now as the road stretched endlessly before her and Tom slept peacefully in the passenger seat, Sarah Walker prepared to face whatever Nevada might hide in the shadows of its cheap motels and empty deserts. Some battles never completely end, but sometimes, if we have enough luck and courage, we can choose which side we fight on.